Hey there, and we're back with a new episode of Indie Insights, a show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest indie game releases, and today we're talking about Ori and the Will of the Wisps. There are many parts of Moon Studios' first game, Ori and the Blind Forest, which made it such a pleasure, and having gone back to this 2015 game over the past few weeks, it's every bit a delight today as it was back then. Where Ori and the Blind Forest delivered a hard mix of 2D platforming with metroidvania elements, it was in the overall presentation, both visually and aurally, that left a mark long after the end credits had stopped rolling. Sitting somewhere close to, if not bang on, cinematic levels in terms of the quality of the animation, Moon Studios' new Will of the Wisps takes this aesthetic from the original and then builds upon it many times over. From a visual perspective, Will of the Wisps is the most beautiful looking game ever made. The screenshots and footage you might have seen on social media, well, in all honesty, it doesn't capture how exquisitely gorgeous Will of the Wisps is, and while we've spent most of the time playing it on a decently crisp studio monitor, it loses none of its sheen back at home on our 7-year-old LCD TV display. Ori's new world is so delicately put together, with so much movement going on everywhere you look, and while we're labouring the point, we can't find a better way to call this out other than saying, and yes, we know this sounds cliched, but it really does look like a painting having come to life. There's a section early on where this painterly style and attention to detail is perfectly demonstrated. You've come across a big old frog, or is it a toad? It's probably a toad, but in any case, having ever so slowly and majestically clambered out of the swamp. Again, having licked its lips, it tips its head towards the screen and shows its head and eyebrows are covered with toadstools that move and shift their positions seemingly independently. Each mushroom looks like it's had a different animation, and like many other examples through the game, it creates a visual that's so very clean and natural looking. And this is true of everything within the game world, from all of the creatures to all of the plants to all of the trees and foliage. Again, to labour the point, it's all utterly exquisite. But it's not just natural. Everything within the Will of the Wisps looks convincing, like it's actually alive, which further enhances the game's cinematic-like qualities. With all this beauty, it's quite easy just to potter around, and while generally not doing much, that's kind of how I spent much of the first early hours or so, while getting used to the changes in the implemented gameplay compared to the original. Essentially, yes, this sticks to the, as we've already suggested, platforming Metroid action-adventure of the original, although there's much more action-adventure going on here than the first of the series, particularly in the step-up in the volume and ferociousness of the boss fights, which on balance feel more pronounced and, dare we say it, are supposed to feel more important than platforming, which to us feels somewhat diminished in this sequel. The new focus on combat is certainly mirrored in Ori's fighting skills, with plenty upgrades over the button mashing from Blind Forest. In Will of the Wisps, combat is more direct, with you having access from the beginning to a new melee weapon, and soon after, you pick up a bow and arrow, with it giving the ability for precision aiming, which the skill is also used within some of the puzzle elements later in the game. At first though, combat feels in some way tougher than before, and without the fast dash in the beginning, we found Ori a little bit lacking in the nimble skill set, and it takes a while before the upgrades kick in, which in turn make Ori that little more responsive, which again in turn takes the edge away from some of the initially difficult combat encounters. Of course, like any other game of this type, the more you get into it, the more powerful and dexterous Ori becomes, with you largely able to customize your character along with your preferred or chosen playstyle. As for the story, well, without going into spoiler territory, which would be so easy to do, it does deliver on the same kind of themes as the original. It addresses topics such as loss and redemption, and while at its bare bones it's a story about light and dark, it avoids a simplistic good versus evil kind of thing and comes with a nuanced balance, insofar as those along such a spectrum can themselves move along within it, even if they choose not to do so. In Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Moon Studios, with the exception of some of the finer, more dazzling and intricate platforming sections of the original, have built something that adds more substance and all-round dazzle within every respect. It's as fun to play, if not more so, once you've leveled Ori up a little, and the story picks at and plucks all of the right heartstrings without feeling shallow or mawkish. It does everything you'd want from a sequel, with it also pushing the visual artistry of this medium to new heights. Overall, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a stunning achievement. Ori and the Will of the Wisps was supplied to us free of charge by Microsoft for review purposes. This review is based on Xbox One gameplay using the post-day one patch code for the system. If you've enjoyed this review, please let us know by clicking that like button, and if you'd like to see more of these, let us know down in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and while you're here, check out other video content we've got on Get Indie Gaming. Many thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you all again here soon for another video.